Welcome to the Deep Dive. I want you to think about the last time you opened up a social media feed.
Oh, boy. Yeah, we all know that feeling.
Right, like within maybe 10 seconds, an algorithm probably threw, I don't know, a dozen different hot takes at you.
At least a dozen.
Exactly. And the videos are frantically cut to keep your eyes from darting away for even a millisecond. I mean, the entire architecture of the app is basically screaming at you to just consume faster.
It's exhausting. It really is an exhausting way to live.
It is. So what if the most radical rebellion against that whole environment isn't, logging off entirely, throwing your phone in a lake, but just
Slowing down.
Yeah, just slowing down. Today, we're looking at a project that completely flips the script on modern media consumption.
And it does so in such a unique way.
It really does. We're examining this sprawling manifesto, or I guess a manifesto in disguise, from a Substack project called Welcome to Chesterton Radio, the little station on Commercial Street.
Such a great title.
It is. And our mission today isn't just to review, another digital podcast network. We are going to unpack a profound philosophy of media, of storytelling, and really of hospitality.
Right, because they were using audio to actively push back against the noise of the modern internet.
Exactly. So, okay, let's unpack this, because this is a fascinating subject. It fundamentally rejects the prevailing logic of the whole digital economy.
It completely ignores it. I mean, the architecture of the modern web is designed around, fiction-free, high-velocity extraction.
Get in, get out.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're supposed to get in, get a quick hit of dopamine, and immediately scroll to the next thing. But this project is attempting to build the exact opposite.
Which is so weird to see online.
It is. It's a digital space designed entirely around lingering, around actually staying put.
And they make that intention clear immediately, but I mean, in a very strange way. Like, if you look at almost any media network's landing page today, they hit you with a value proposition in the first 3 seconds.
Oh, for sure. It's always like, subscribe now, get our daily history podcasts.
Right, exactly. Buy this, click here. But Chesterton Radio bypasses that entirely. They begin with this hyper-specific, multi-paragraph physical description of a small brick building on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas.
Yes, the detail is incredible.
It's so vivid. They describe walking past this modest storefront at dusk. There are no flashing lights. There's just this warm lamp burning in the front window.
Sitting right next to a stack of books.
Yeah, stack of books and an old cathedral radio with a polished walnut cabinet. And then they say the front door is intentionally left slightly ajar.
Like an invitation.
Yes. You walk in, the wooden floors creak, and you smell fresh coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my immediate reaction to this was, I have to admit, total skepticism.
Really? Why is that?
Because it feels like they are handing us the sensory details of a cozy indie bookstore to describe what is, mechanically speaking, just a website and an RSS feed.
I see what you mean.
Right. Why build this elaborate physical metaphor instead of just stating what the network actually provides?
Well, because the medium is the message in this context. By anchoring a digital space in a physical, tangible metaphor, they are attempting to change the psychological posture of the user.
Change their posture before they even hear anything.
Exactly. Before a single piece of audio is played. In user experience design, we usually talk about reducing friction to make a transaction as fast as possible.
Yeah, Amazon one-click buying.
Right. But Chesterton Radio is deliberately introducing atmospheric friction. The metaphorical creaky floors, the long hallway.
Oh, so the friction is a feature, not a bug.
Yes, it forces a psychological slowdown. They're prioritizing hospitality over efficiency.
Hospitality over efficiency. That distinction makes so much sense when you think about how different spaces dictate our behavior in real life.
Absolutely. Think about an airport terminal.
Oh, the worst place for hospitality.
Exactly. It's designed for maximum efficiency. You don't strike up a deep philosophical conversation at the TSA checkpoint.
No, you just want to get your shoes back on and get to your gate.
You just want to get through it. But a living room is designed for hospitality. You sit down, you take off your coat, your guard drops.
You actually look at the other person.
Right. And in the digital realm, we are almost always in the airport terminal. We are just transiting from one piece of information to the next.
That is such a profound way to look at our online lives. We are just constantly rushing to the next gate.
So that lamp in the window of this imaginary station in Atchison, it's a signal that someone is expected.
Like they were waiting for you specifically.
Yes. When you cross the threshold into a space that has been prepared for you, you shift from being a consumer of data to being a guest.
And a guest acts completely differently than a consumer.
Entirely differently. As a guest, you process information differently. You are more charitable, you're more patient, and you're open to genuine conversation.
You really see that shift in posture reflected in how they describe the studio itself in the article. You walk down this imaginary hallway, past black and white photos of old broadcasters, and step into the main room, which is just lined with books.
Oh, the library section.
Yeah. But the organizational system, or I guess the lack thereof, is what really caught my eye. They note that the books are not arranged by genre or author.
No, they're arranged by effects.
Arranged by affection.
Yeah.
Which is just such a wildly subjective concept.
It's a highly revealing detail, though. Arranging a library by affection is the exact antithesis of a sterile, optimized database.
It really is. They describe Charles Dickens nodding politely toward Jane Austen and Shakespeare sitting casually next to, like, old engineering manuals and travel journals.
It paints a picture of a human mind that just loves disparate things deeply.
Yeah, and recognizes the hidden connective tissue between them all. But realistically, I mean, a digital network still has to categorize its content, right?
Sure, you need some structure.
So is this arranged by affection idea just poetic license? Or does it actually impact how a listener navigates their audio?
Oh, I think it acts as a very real filter for curation. A traditional network silos its content to game search algorithms.
Right, you build a true crime feed, a history feed, a tech feed.
Exactly. You play to the algorithm. But Chesterton Radio is rejecting algorithmic siloing entirely. By arranging their world by affection, they are telling the listener something important.
Which is what?
They're saying, look, we're broadcasting these specific classic novels, these old radio dramas, and these essays, not because they fit a demographic keyword.
Not because it's trending on TikTok.
Right. But because we genuinely believe they still have something vital to say. It demands a much higher level of trust from the listener.
You're relying on the curator's taste rather than a machine learning recommendation engine.
Precisely. You have to trust the host of the house.
Okay, so if the entire foundation of this metaphorical building is built on subjective affection and hospitality, we really have to look at the spiritual architect behind it.
We do. G.K. Chesterton.
Right. The network is named after G.K. Chesterton, the early 20th century English writer and philosopher. But the Substack is careful to frame this project not as a historical society.
No, it's not a museum dedicated to preserving his biography.
Exactly. It's more like a laboratory for his core conviction. And that conviction is the idea that the world is astonishing, and our primary duty is to learn to notice it again.
This is where the underlying philosophy of the network really crystallizes for me. Chesterton believed that human beings suffer from a kind of spiritual amnesia.
Spiritual amnesia. What does that mean exactly?
Well, we get used to the miraculous. We wake up, the sun rises, gravity holds us to the floor, and we just treat it all as incredibly mundane.
We just take it for granted. Here is where I have to push back a little on the premise, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
You have a station named after a guy who died in 1936. You have this digital architecture wrapped in a metaphor of cathedral radios, fountain pens, and 1940s ribbon microphones.
Very vintage aesthetic.
Very. It is incredibly tempting to look at this and just write it off as pure, unadulterated nostalgia. Like, it feels like a retreat.
I can see why you'd say that.
Right. When the 21st century feels chaotic and overwhelming and hyper-connected, isn't this just a really sophisticated way of hiding under a vintage blanket?
That is honestly the most common critique of any project that leans on historical aesthetics. You're not alone in thinking that.
It just feels safe.
Yeah, it does. However, Chesterton Radio makes a razor-sharp distinction between nostalgia and wonder. And understanding that specific distinction is vital to getting what they are doing.
Okay, so how do they define the difference?
Nostalgia is fundamentally a delusion. It is a coping mechanism where we just edit out all the disease, the war, the hardship of the past.
Yeah, we just pretend it was a golden age.
Exactly. We pretend it was perfect simply because it is safely behind us.
It's like putting a sepia filter on Instagram to make a totally mundane photo look profound. It's just an artificial gloss.
That's a perfect analogy. Yes. Nostalgia is an escape from reality. Wonder, on the other hand, is an intense confrontation with reality.
A confrontation? That sounds almost aggressive.
Well, it means wonder doesn't require escaping to the 1940s. It requires upgrading your perception of the present moment.
Upgrading your perception.
Yeah. Chesterton Radio frames it so beautifully in the text. They say, surprise happens when something unexpected interrupts the ordinary.
Okay.
But wonder happens when we discover that the ordinary was extraordinary all along.
Wow. That is a staggering way to reframe perception.
Mm-hmm.
It implies that boredom isn't a lack of interesting things in our environment.
Right. It's not the environment's fault.
It's a failure of our own attention. They use the example of a sunrise in the piece. Like,
Yeah.
a child is totally mesmerized by a sunrise because they haven't yet learned to expect it.
They haven't grown numb to it yet.
But adults ignore it because of hedonic adaptation. We've seen it 1,000 times, so our brains basically classify it as solved and tune it out.
Exactly. And Chesterton apparently possessed this rare ability to look at a simple wooden fence or a loaf of bread and view them not as static, boring objects,
But as what?
as active invitations to gratitude.
And that is the exact cognitive shift the station is trying to engineer in its listeners, isn't it?
It is. They are not broadcasting old shows because they think the mid-20th century was some flawless utopia.
No, they actually acknowledge that every era has its unique wisdom and its specific blind spots.
Right. They broadcast these older voices because they believe the past acts as a necessary counterweight to the present.
To balance us out.
Yes. Ignoring historical literature or audio simply because it is old is a form of chronological snobbery.
Chronological snobbery. That is such a brilliant concept. The assumption that simply because we live in a later year, we are inherently smarter or more enlightened than everyone who lived before us.
It's incredibly arrogant. So the station embraces paradox to break through that exact arrogance.
They lean really heavily into Chesterton's love for contradictory truths, right?
They do. Like the idea that true strength often manifests as gentleness, or that tradition is actually the prerequisite for meaningful creativity.
Which feels so backward to how we normally think. We usually think tradition stifles creativity.
Right. But they refuse to accept the false dichotomies of the modern era. You are constantly told today to choose between rigorous reason and wild imagination.
Like, you have to be either a scientist or an artist, but you can't be both.
Exactly. Chesterton Radio argues that reason without imagination is just sterile, and imagination without reason is chaos.
They have to operate in tandem.
They absolutely do.
So if the ultimate goal of all of this is to cultivate this complex state of contemplative wonder and to break through our hedonic adaptation,
Yeah.
why is audio the chosen weapon here? Like, why use radio or podcasting to achieve this instead of writing a massive series of books or producing highly polished visual documentaries?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's because audio possesses unique psychological properties that make it the perfect vehicle for this specific philosophy.
What kind of properties?
Well, the manifesto points out an inherent truth about a broadcast. You cannot hold it in your hand.
Right, it's invisible.
Unlike a book on a shelf or a painting on a wall, an audio broadcast exists in the air for a fraction of a second and then instantly transmutes into memory.
It is ephemeral by nature. Let's break down the mechanics of how different media engage the brain, because I think this is crucial for you, the listener, to understand what Chesterton Radio is actually pulling off here.
Please do.
Think of media consumption as a sliding scale of cognitive labor. On one extreme, you have film and television.
Which requires almost zero labor.
Right. A movie does 100% of the heavy lifting for you. It dictates the exact lighting, the precise tone of the actor's voice, the color of the room, the framing of the shot.
You are essentially a passive receptacle for a completely finished vision.
Exactly. You just sit there and absorb it. Now, on the opposite extreme, you have text. A book gives you absolutely nothing but abstract black symbols on a white page.
So your brain has to do all the work.
Yes. Your brain has to work incredibly hard to conjure the faces, the sounds, the pacing, the atmosphere. It's high cognitive labor.
And audio sits perfectly in the middle of that spectrum.
It really does. It provides just enough sensory input to guide the experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
The cadence of a voice, the faint crackle of static, the sound of footsteps in the snow.
But it stubbornly refuses to provide the visual canvas.
It leaves room, as the station describes it.
That's the perfect phrase. It leaves room. It forces a partnership between the broadcaster and the listener.
Think about it like this. If you and I are listening to a radio drama on Chesterton Radio, and they play an audio cue of a distant train whistle blowing over the Kansas prairie,
Okay, I'm picturing it.
I guarantee the train station in your mind looks completely different from the train station in my mind.
Without a doubt.
You might be picturing a rainy night in the 1930s,
Yeah.
and I might be picturing a dusty summer afternoon in the 1800s. The broadcaster provides the spark, but the listener provides the kindling.
And that co-creation is what makes audio so profoundly intimate.
Because you help build the world.
Exactly. Because the listener is actively furnishing the world with their own imagination, they feel a sense of ownership over the narrative.
It respects the audience's intelligence instead of spoon-feeding them.
And furthermore, because it does not monopolize your visual cortex, audio has the unique ability to accompany human labor rather than interrupt it.
That is such a vital distinction. I mean, if you want to watch a YouTube video, you have to literally stop what you were doing, sit down, and stare at a glowing rectangle.
You have to pause your life.
But radio wraps around your life. The manifesto beautifully illustrates people listening while driving a truck across a long highway or fixing a fence or sitting in a workshop.
It provides companionship without demanding paralysis.
Which is exactly the dynamic playing out for the listener tuning into this deep dive right now.
Yeah.
You are probably driving or doing dishes or walking the dog.
We are accompanying you right now. Audio fosters this parasocial intimacy precisely because it infiltrates the mundane moments of our daily routines.
That's why we remember the voices of broadcasters we grew up listening to. Not because they were the most visually arresting people.
But because they became welcome, reliable guests in our homes.
They mastered the pacing of human conversation. And part of that mastery is knowing how to use silences.
The silences are so important.
Let's talk about the pacing, because modern audio, even a lot of podcasts, often completely strips out the silence. Editors use software to slice out every single breath, every tiny pause, to artificially accelerate the speech.
It's all about maximizing words per minute.
And the result is this wall of sound that just feels frantic and stressful. But Chesterton Radio intentionally preserves the pause.
They let the music fade completely before the announcer speaks.
Yes. They allow a 2-second silence to hang in the air after a profound thought.
They are pacing the audio for human nervous systems, not for engagement metrics.
Which is such a relief. So if audio is the ideal medium for this kind of intimacy, how do they actually organize all this content? We established earlier that they reject the standard algorithmic feed model.
Right, they lean into their architectural metaphor instead.
They describe the station as a house of many rooms. It operates more like a neighborhood you wander through rather than a playlist you just blindly consume.
And the spatial organization of content changes how you perceive its value. Let's examine a few of these specific rooms they talk about to see how this works in practice.
Let's start with the morning room, which is where they broadcast morning prayer. What is striking here is the intentionality of the schedule.
How do you mean?
Most morning media is specifically designed to agitate you. Like, the morning news alerts you to everything that is broken and terrifying in the world.
Oh, absolutely. The morning financial podcasts tell you what you are missing out on in the markets. It's all anxiety-driven.
Right. But the morning room is designed to ground you instead. It moves slowly through scripture, literature, and history. It's attempting to arm the listener with a broader perspective before they face the chaos of the day.
It sets the tone, and then from there you move into the library, which really serves as the core intellectual hub of the station.
This is where they host their deep dive conversations on classic novels or forgotten essays.
Yes. But their pedagogical approach in the library is fascinating to me. They explicitly state in the manifesto, reviews and conversations, we hope to begin them.
I found that line incredibly perceptive. I mean, think about it. When you read a modern review of a book online, the goal of the critic is usually to render a final verdict.
To have the last word.
Exactly. It's like, this book is a 4 out of 5, here are its flaws, here are its strengths, case closed. It's an autopsy.
An autopsy. That's a great way to put it.
Chesterton Radio approaches literature not as a corpse to be dissected, but as a living entity to be befriended.
They view a classic book as a companion. And you don't summarize a companion. You spend time with them.
You talk with them. And this philosophy extends right into what they call History Hall, where they completely upend how we normally process historical events.
History is usually presented so chronologically, just a linear parade of dates, wars, and successions.
It feels very sterile, like memorizing a spreadsheet.
But Chesterton Radio treats history as a gathering of neighbors.
And this idea reaches its absolute peak in the room they call the Merry Paradox.
The Merry Paradox is perhaps their most inventive conceptual space. I just love this idea.
It's so cool. It is an imagined inn where historical figures from wildly different centuries are placed at the very same table to share a meal and a debate.
It is the ultimate antidote to the chronological snobbery we discussed earlier.
Imagine the dinner party, sitting Thomas Aquinas, Charles Dickens, a modern aerospace engineer, and, I don't know, a 19th century poet at a table.
And treating all of their perspectives as equally valid inputs into a conversation about, say, the nature of ambition.
Or the meaning of grief. It completely demolishes the idea of the linear timeline of progress, and it replaces it with this timeless, ongoing human dialogue.
It levels the playing field across centuries, but, while the Mary Paradox is intellectually rigorous, the most radical room in the station, from a purely structural standpoint, has to be the open door.
The open door. This is their continuous live stream.
Right.
And my initial thought as someone who analyzes media economics was just, why? Why on earth would you dedicate bandwidth and resources to a continuous stream that isn't aggressively monetized or programmed for peak engagement?
Because the purpose of the open door is entirely countercultural. It is not designed to capture your attention at all.
Then what is it designed for?
It is designed to offer its presence. The manifesto states that there is no schedule demanding your focus in that room, only the quiet assurance that, quote, somewhere, someone has left the lights on.
Think about the psychology of loneliness in the digital age for a second.
It's an epidemic.
We are hyper-connected, but often deeply, profoundly isolated. If you are awake at 3 a.m., the internet is more than happy to offer you endless distraction.
Endless doom scrolling.
But it rarely offers actual comfort. The open door operates like an audiovisual. It's basically the digital equivalent of a nightlight.
A nightlight for the soul. It transforms the station from a mere content provider into an actual supportive community space.
And what ties all these rooms together, the library, the inn, the live stream, is their fundamental currency. The station does not trade in hot takes or breaking news or political debate.
No, its primary currency is narrative. They are completely obsessed with stories.
Which sort of begs the question, if you are trying to impart these profound philosophical truths about wonder, gratitude, and the human condition, why hide those truths inside fictional stories? Why not just broadcast clear, articulate essays and logical arguments all day?
Well, because arguments only engage the intellect.
Only the brain.
Right. While stories bypass our intellectual defense mechanisms entirely and engage the whole person.
The heart and the mind.
The manifesto makes this point so powerfully. It says you can listen to a masterful, logically flawless lecture on the virtue of courage, and you will likely forget all the details within a week.
Oh, for sure. You'll forget it by lunch.
But if you read the story of a small boy facing down a giant with a sling, that narrative structure embeds itself in your subconscious permanently.
It's the difference between being handed a map and actually walking the territory yourself.
Exactly. Stories simulate experience. They argue that when you read a truly great novel, the physical world around you doesn't actually change.
But your perception of it does.
Yes. You finish the book, you walk out your front door, and suddenly you notice the quiet dignity of a neighbor you previously just ignored.
Or you recognize the subtle cruelty in a casual remark someone makes. Stories calibrate our moral vision.
And this concept is perfectly embodied in the station's dedication to Father Brown.
Father Brown, the detective character created by G.K. Chesterton.
He is the complete antithesis of the modern, hyper-rational hero.
If you compare Father Brown to Sherlock Holmes, the contrast is just glaring.
It's night and day.
Holmes operates like a human supercomputer. He looks at the mud on your shoe, calculates the exact trajectory of your walk, and just coldly deduces the crime.
He views criminals as fascinating puzzles to be solved.
Right, they're just data points to him. But Father Brown, on the other hand, is this short, unassuming priest who constantly drops his umbrella and seems a bit, lost most of the time.
He's incredibly disarming.
He doesn't solve crimes using forensic science or magnifying glasses. He solves them using radical empathy.
He possesses a profound theology of crime.
A theology of crime, what does that mean?
The manifesto explains that Father Brown can catch the criminal because he understands the temptation himself.
Oh, wow.
He doesn't look at a murderer as some alien species. He looks into his own heart, recognizes his own capacity for darkness, and extrapolates from there.
So he solves the mystery by understanding the humanity of the perpetrator.
Exactly. He knows that every sinner is also someone's son or daughter.
It completely shifts the entire genre from a mere whodunit into this deep exploration of conscience, justice, and mercy.
But this introduces a fascinating tension within the station's programming, actually.
What's the tension?
Well, they broadcast the classic original Father Brown stories, we know that. But they don't stop there. They actively write and broadcast new original fiction.
Oh, right. New Father Brown mysteries.
Yeah, and new series like the Tall Girl stories and fictionalized accounts of the little station on Commercial Street itself.
I have to ask, why dilute the feed with modern imitations?
No.
I mean, if you genuinely believe that Chesterton, Dickens, and Austen are absolute masters of the craft.
The heavyweights.
Right. Why would a small operation in Kansas dedicate precious resources to writing new amateur fiction? Shouldn't they just act as a pristine museum for the classics?
If they acted as a museum, they would violate their own philosophy of a living tradition.
How so?
A museum preserves dead artifacts behind glass. A living tradition is an ongoing conversation.
Wow.
The author of the manifesto points out that if previous generations had simply stopped writing because they assumed all the great works were already finished, we would never have gotten Tolkien or C.S. Lewis or Chesterton himself.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, every revered classic was, at one point, just a newly minted story trying to find an audience.
Exactly. By writing new stories, they are not arrogantly trying to replace the masters. They are just taking a seat at the table.
They are joining the dialogue.
Yes. They are asking the same timeless questions. What is courage? How does grace operate in tragedy? But they are exploring them using the vernacular in the context of the present day.
It creates this sort of reciprocal ecosystem. A classic novel inspires a new audio drama, which in turn prompts a new listener to go back and discover the classic.
It feeds itself.
But practically speaking, this ecosystem is incredibly labor-intensive. Curating the library, writing original fiction, editing the audio, running a 24/7 live stream, this requires immense time and financial resources.
It's not cheap to run.
Which brings us to the economics of Chesterton Radio. How does a station that actively refuses to play the algorithmic game actually keep the lights on?
That is the big question.
Because they aren't chasing viral trends, so they aren't getting massive CPMs.
And for those listening who don't know, CPMs are cost per mil, the standard advertising metric where you get paid per 1,000 views.
Right. It's how the entire internet makes money.
But their economic survival depends on a complete rejection of programmatic advertising. They operate entirely on listener support.
Like public radio.
Yes, but they don't just view it as crowdfunding. They view it as a reclamation of the historical concept of the patron.
The patron. You know, today, when we hear the word patron, we usually picture a wealthy aristocrat writing a massive check just to get their name plastered on a museum wing.
It feels very transactional. An exchange of money for ego.
But the manifesto describes a small, unpolished brass plaque in their station that just thanks those who believe thoughtful conversation was worth preserving.
They view the patron not as an investor expecting a financial return, but as a steward.
Think of the historical relationship between a patron and a craftsman. The patron didn't hover over the composer and tell him how to write the symphony.
No, they didn't meddle in the art.
They simply provided the resources so the composer didn't have to starve while doing the work.
I like to think of it like a gardener protecting a greenhouse. The gardener doesn't manufacture the orchids.
Right, they can't force the flower to grow.
They just maintain the climate, the heat, the water, the protection from the harsh wind, so the orchids have the luxury of blooming at their own pace.
By acting as the financial greenhouse, the patrons of Chesterton Radio buy the station its most crucial asset, absolute editorial freedom.
Because they aren't reliant on advertisers, they are completely immune to the pressures of scale.
In the modern attention economy, if your revenue depends on clicks, you are structurally incentivized to generate outrage, shock, or shallow controversy.
Because that is what drives immediate engagement.
You have to optimize for the broadest, most easily agitated demographic.
Precisely. But Chesterton Radio doesn't care about the raw number of downloads. They don't care about going viral.
They care about the depth of the interaction.
They measure success by the grandfather who uses an old radio drama to connect with his grandson, or the exhausted nurse who finds solace in the open door stream after a grueling 12-hour shift.
Those are metrics of impact that a corporate spreadsheet simply cannot quantify.
Because they're insulated by their patrons, they don't wake up and ask, what topic will generate the largest crowd today?
They ask, what piece of art is most worth sharing today?
And in media, those two questions almost never have the same answer.
So true. They refer to their supporters as the keepers of the lamp. It is a collective agreement to keep the warm light burning in the window so that the next weary traveler who wanders past the station can find their way inside.
It's a profoundly romantic vision of media.
It is. But, okay, we really have to address the elephant in the room here. The great irony embedded at the absolute heart of this entire project.
Oh, the technology aspect.
Yes, we've spent all this time discussing the tactile warmth of cathedral radios, the slow pacing of 1940s broadcasting, and the philosophical superiority of analog hospitality. Yet Chesterton Radio is not operated by Luddites.
Not even remotely. In their section detailing behind the microphone, they pull back the curtain and reveal a highly sophisticated, technologically advanced operation.
They discuss their unfinished rooms, blueprints for future documentaries and live broadcasts, and they freely admit that their studio is powered by fiber optic cables, modern digital audio workstations, and, remarkably, cutting-edge artificial intelligence.
They explicitly name Notebook LM as one of their core tools.
Which blew my mind. The juxtaposition is just striking. How does a station dedicated to the vintage warmth of the past rationalize the use of modern AI?
I know, it seems like a contradiction at first glance.
I found myself trying to reconcile this. Like, are they hypocrites, building a 1940s aesthetic using AI?
But their justification is actually quite brilliant. They don't view technology as an inherent evil, nor do they worship it as a savior.
They view it strictly as a steward of memory.
A steward of memory. That phrase is doing a lot of heavy lifting. What does it actually mean to use AI as a steward of memory rather than a content generator?
Well, think of it like a massive digital loom.
A loom!
If you were trying to synthesize a complex conversation between a Thomas Aquinas theological treatise, a dense Dickens novel, and a 1940s radio transcript, a human brain can only hold so many threads at once before dropping them.
There's too much data to process simultaneously.
Right. So Chesterton Radio uses tools like Notebook LM not to artificially generate the final script for them. They aren't just hitting a button and saying, write my show.
They are using it to help manage the threads.
Exactly. The AI helps them identify hidden patterns across vast amounts of text, deepening their original questions and revealing unexpected connections they might have missed.
It acts as an amplifier of intent.
An amplifier of intent. That's a great way to put it.
If your intent is to churn out cheap clickbait articles, AI will absolutely help you do that faster and worse than ever before.
It will happily flood the internet with garbage.
But if your intent is deep, rigorous hospitality, the technology allows you to weave a much richer, more comprehensive tapestry.
They're using the bleeding edge of 21st century technology to painstakingly recreate the intimacy and the slow pacing of the 1940s.
Which proves a vital point. The technology itself is morally neutral.
Fiber optic cables are just furniture.
Right. You can use them to blast a user with toxic political arguments, or you can use them to transmit the quiet sound of a cello and a thoughtful meditation on gratitude.
As the manifesto wisely notes, the tools constantly change, but human nature remains static. We still crave voices that we can actually trust. We still rely on stories to navigate difficult seasons of our lives.
The ultimate destination of the broadcast isn't the smartphone or the Bluetooth speaker sitting on your counter.
The final receiver is the human heart.
And the station recognizes that you cannot construct a human heart using software. You can only reach it through trust, built slowly, one deliberate conversation at a time.
Which perfectly frames their vision for the future. When they talk about their unfinished rooms, they aren't outlining some corporate strategy for aggressive market expansion or an IPO.
They're expanding their capacity for hospitality.
They want to emulate a great library, because a library doesn't become legendary simply because it adds more miles of shelving.
No, it becomes legendary because the specific books on those shelves continually change the lives of the people who walk through the doors.
Chesterton Radio states that they don't measure their future in fiscal years or subscriber milestones. They measure their future in welcomes.
In welcomes, it is a metric of human connection, not digital scale.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started by questioning the utility of physical metaphor, this small brick building in Kansas.
And we discovered how that metaphor of creaky floors and fresh coffee fundamentally alters the psychological posture of the listener. It prioritizes welcome over sheer efficiency.
We dissected Chesterton's critical distinction between nostalgia, which we realized is just an escape from reality, and wonder, which is a deeper, more demanding engagement with the miraculous nature of the ordinary.
We explored the cognitive mechanics of audio itself, analyzing how radio's refusal to provide a visual canvas forces the listener into a co-creative partnership,
allowing the medium to accompany human labor rather than aggressively interrupt it.
We walked through the architecture of their programming, from the grounding perspective of the morning room to the anti-chronological snobbery of the Mary paradox.
And the radical, unmonetized presence of the open door stream. We also analyze the psychology of narrative persuasion, contrasting Sherlock Holmes's cold deduction with Father Brown's radical empathetic theology of crime.
And we understood why a living tradition actually requires the constant creation of new original stories rather than just acting as a museum.
We examined the economics of their independence, redefining the patron as a steward who protects a digital greenhouse from the toxic incentives of the attention economy.
And finally, we saw how they deploy cutting-edge AI, like Notebook LM, as a digital loom, using the fastest technology available to preserve the slowest, most thoughtful pacing possible.
It truly is a masterclass in intentional media design.
It serves as a potent reminder that we are not just passive victims of the internet's noise, we have agency.
We do. We can choose to seek out, support, and actively build quiet spaces that offer genuine companionship.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to carry forward.
Throughout their manifesto, Chesterton Radio repeatedly returns to the image of the warm lamp left burning in the front window. That lamp is not trying to illuminate the entire city block.
It isn't flashing neon to demand attention.
It is simply glowing to signal to any weary traveler that someone is awake, that someone expects them, and that they are safe to enter.
So as you navigate your own life, within the physical walls of your home and the dynamics of your workplace, and especially in the digital footprint you leave online,
what is your lamp in the window? How are you deliberately engineering spaces that offer hospitality, patience, and quiet companionship in a world that is so desperately addicted to velocity and noise?
it is a question worth lingering over.
It really is. Thank you for taking the time to slow down and join us on this deep dive. And as they say every night as the broadcast signs off from that little station on Commercial Street, come in, stay a while.